Hi everyone, I'm Damien.
And I'm Jeremy.
Welcome to our Suburb Data podcast, where we cover everything from property investing to expert busting. If you're new here, we share our personal and professional experiences from over 20 years in the game. So you skip the mistakes we made and go straight to property investment success. And today, Jez, we're going to be talking about the long journey finding the right buyers agent. So we're going to dial in Ricky. And I guess inspiration for this is I've done over 2,000 initial consults, and I thought this was a while ago before starting our business. I don't do as many these days, still do them, but I had a chat with Ricky, your friend, and he was in search for a real estate buyer's agent. And I had this great chat with him that went for close to an hour. And I'm thinking this is just great value add for anyone listening to this and anyone starting out. So let's jump in. Ricky, I'm going to be bringing you up on the big screen. Let's have a look. Have I got you there? How's that? Can you hear us okay, Ricky?
Hey, how are you? Yes,
Hey,
I can hear
mate.
you. Hello, Jez.
All righty. So, Ricky, thanks for joining us. Where are you joining us from? Because ideally, I wanted to have you in the office, but in the studio in New South Wales, but you're overseas, aren't you?
Yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, my life is overseas, and I'm based in Shanghai, China. I've been here for almost 8 years, and actually been overseas for almost 20 years. So, yeah, I'm an Australian expat, just living, I guess, my dream overseas at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. So I'll get started. So what made you, first think about investing in Australia? Like, was this your first property that you recently purchased?
Yes, it actually was because, like I said, I was been overseas 20 years, so I didn't buy a property while I was growing up in Sydney and in my sort of university and first years of work in Sydney. So I left at that time when probably I would be ready to buy, and moved to London and some other countries after that. So I kind of, left the Australian property and investing in Australia just to the side because I was based overseas, and it just wasn't on my radar for quite some time, actually.
And how much did you know about Jeremy before your journey on doing all the initial consults? Did you pick Jeremy's brain a lot or not really?
Yeah, so I guess I've seen Jeremy's evolution in the property space, and I was there with his first one, and was part of some of the early renovations in some of his properties. So yeah, definitely he was my go-to for many questions, and I was quite lucky to have him as a resource and a few other friends who are big into property and investing, and they have their own sort of spin on investing and how they do it. So I definitely had some good resources back home that I had to tap into.
Yeah, and I guess being an expat, like what were the main challenges that you faced? I know from my experiences a lot with lenders, like dealing with clients and they're overseas and it's just hard to get lending. What were your main challenges?
Yeah, that was probably that was the biggest hurdle, the lending part. And that's probably what it took me so long to make the decision, and then also then work out how the lending works for an expat. Essentially, if I was to boil it down, the banks look at, obviously you're an expat, but then they look at what currency you earn. So some expats might still earn Australian AD within Australia, depending on their contract. And then most expats will earn their local currency. And if it's a USD or a Singapore or a Hong Kong currency, then the big four definitely look on those ones very favorably. But the Chinese currency, the RMB, is not looked upon so favorably by Westpac, ANZ, and then CBA and NAB didn't even look at it at all. So definitely less options in terms of those four. And then the next tier of lenders don't have any expat offerings for Chinese expats or Australian expats in China. So I only had a few in the end to go to. To be exact, I had three third tier lenders and two ANZ and Westpac as options.
But you're
And
able to
that's
get that,
using
weren't
the word
you?
options. Yeah, so I went with Westpac first, and that didn't work out at all because they were just going to give me, let's say, 100,000, like just nothing. So they're going to lend me something, but very little.
Yeah, so you're limited from a serviceability point of view. And I guess moving from that, so that was the main challenge that you found. But I guess the other thing is you can do all these initial consults from overseas, like with Zoom and these online meetings. So when did you realize that, look, I'm ready, I want to buy a property? What was the sort of first steps to realizing that you needed a buyer's agent?
Yeah, I was stuck on the lending part for quite a while. That was actually, I just I didn't know about buyer's agents first, so I went to a mortgage broker and they started to look at my salary, and they also looked at my wife's salary because at first we were looking at buying together and doing it that way. So then they had to look at where she is citizen of, what's her salary. So we got a ballpark figure of what we could borrow from a bank. And then when you start to get into the weeds of it all, it just seemed that it wasn't possible to, or maybe it wasn't feasible to borrow together because she's not an Australian citizen. And then through my conversations with the mortgage broker, they started to reference like, okay, we have connections with real estate agents, but you might also, being based overseas, want to talk to a buyer's agent. And I was like, okay, what is this? I need to do some more digging. And that's how it started initially.
Okay. And did you realize, I guess, how long did it take you to start reaching out to these buyers agents? Was it like once you, like, what made you take the leap? I guess that's mainly the question. To like, how did you start with the process? Pretty much with these buyers agents. Like, did you jump on Google, or was it referrals, or did you ask Jeremy? And it's okay if you didn't.
Yeah. I started a bit slow. I was a bit like, okay, what's a buyer's agent? I'll look into myself, like a little bit of Google and literally, what it is.
Mm.
And then I understood that it's actually a bigger thing in America than it is, say, in Australia. It's a different history in America. So there was obviously a little more resources to the American side, but then I just switched to Australia and then obviously started to see some names pop up in Google. But yeah, I reached out to Jeremy. I reached out to another friend because I think I found a name, a buyer's agent, and then I find them on Instagram, and then you see that you start getting the algorithm, feeding you more buyer's agents. So that sort of helps you sort of start to find them. And then my wife also, with her Chinese background, was able to dig into the Chinese side of buyer's agents, and that's a whole other sort of market there of the Chinese Australians or Chinese from abroad buying in Australia, and they use Chinese based Australians in different markets, Sydney, Melbourne, for instance, that are very active on Chinese social media, and you can find them quite easily. So my first meeting was with a Sydney buyer's agent who works with Chinese buyers solely, pretty much.
And were they new developments or were they established properties?
He seemed to be buying just in Sydney and just buying, just big houses. Basically, he was sharing some examples of houses that he was visiting or buying, and they were typical 2-story with a big backyard or pool type places around different parts of Sydney, obviously depending on budget. But yeah, he was definitely just buying, a standalone house.
So at the time of recording, it's like what, February 2025. When did you start the journey? Like, do you remember roughly what month and year it was?
It was January, oh, actually, it was December 2023
2020.
that I had my first call with a mortgage broker, and I was back in Sydney at the time, and then I came back to Shanghai in January 2024, and that's when I started to do a lot of these Zoom calls and meetings and looking at the mortgage side of things, the finance, but and that took 4 months of back and forth, so that was actually a slow process, and then by month 4 or 5, I was really getting into the buyer's agent side. So that was the start of the buyer's agents after month 4.
Yeah, the lending can be quite heavy, kind of going through the lending, even in Australia, it can be a bit of a process. But how many
Mm.
buyers agents do you know roughly that you spoke to? Like, it doesn't have to be exact, but was it around 10 or?
I'll give you the exact number. It was 9. I ended up having conversations with 9, and they varied from 10, 15-minute chat to well over an hour chat. So I spoke to some multiple times and on and off, not just calling, through email as well. So I did speak to 9 in total.
Yeah. And was there anything specific you're looking for? Like, did you have like a checklist, or was that sort of checklist growing as you're meeting more and more on the go?
It definitely grew, yes. The more I spoke to each buyer's agent, the more I understood what their value was. And through my conversations with Jeremy and some other friends who are heavy into property, who don't use buyer's agents because they're just they know the market well enough and they've got so much experience, but they definitely had some sort of insight into these buyer's agents and if they were a good fit for me. So I definitely used them as a resource. But yeah, overall it was sorry, I forgot the last part of the
No,
question. But
So do you have a checklist now after going through all those 9?
oh,
I mean, you don't have to go through the points, but you do.
Yes.
You would do your due diligence differently starting again.
I would definitely think about, I did come up with some key questions that I wanted to ask throughout the so obviously when you have your first call with a buyer's agent, they might have a little pitch, or they might just sort of want to ask you some general questions, and then it's a back and forth, or maybe they wait to the end where you can get to ask your questions. They want to sort of give you their what they can really offer. So I definitely had some key questions that I wanted to ask about. So in terms of a buyer's agent, I wanted to know what their investing philosophy was and what they do in terms of their own investing. That was a big one for me. I also wanted to know, like, where do they really buy, and where are they based? So obviously you might speak to the founder of that company, and then they have their buyer's agents. So I definitely wanted to know, is it a one-man shop, or was it a big team? And then who would I be working with? So I tried to dig into that a bit more, because I started to realize that I wanted a buyer's agent who was based in the market that I was going to eventually buy in. I didn't want someone who was based in Sydney and then would go up to, say, regional Queensland and use someone up there that wasn't part of their company, maybe just a property manager, which it seemed that was often the case, because they can't be everywhere in Australia, which is fair enough. So those things were important to me. And also it was important to, like, just, I wanted to like the person. They needed to be likable to me, and I wanted to be able to, communicate freely with them, and just, see that they were real and honest, even though we're talking online, through Zoom or whatever. It just, I wanted to gauge that gut feeling of just, they seem like good people. They're going to work for me, and I'm not just maybe a number in their database.
I think that's important, is building that sort of rapport. And I guess before having every initial consultation, did you spend time researching a lot of the firms that you met with? So, i.e., you went on Instagram, you went on their website. Like, did you do a lot of that? Because a lot of the time, these companies, and it's just normal, like through podcasts, it's a way to sort of show your personality and build trust. But there's a lot of people that have these podcasts that aren't really, I don't know, honest. They're sort of like got this facade in front to show you that they're a certain way to try and bring the business in. I'd say like maybe a bit fake. There are people out there
put
like
on a
that.
show.
They put on a show. Did you find that when you were doing your research that a lot of them were like, oh, they're just not suited to me? Like they're maybe a bit flashy or a bit full of themselves or a bit, yeah. What was that experience like, sort of shortlisting the BAs?
Yeah, because obviously, as I said, I spoke with 9, so there are hundreds. So, and you can find a lot of them. A lot of them are prominent on YouTube, either through their own channels or through being interviewed on other podcasts. So that was a good way actually to see who they were. For an hour-long format, you could hear what they were talking about, and their sort of philosophy, and just get a vibe that way. So I definitely used that filter to see if I was someone, because as I said, with the mortgage planning, I had time that I was trying to work out the mortgage. So I started to use this time to sort of watch podcasts, and some of those podcasts were with buyer's agents. So it just sort of killed two birds with one stone. I could learn about property in Australia, what it is right now, and then I could also find suitable buyer's agents to at least sort of narrow down who I'd want to pick in the end.
Yeah,
So
good stuff. And I think what stood out, so maybe let's start with the good interactions that you had with some of the buyers agents firms. So what were some of the examples that you could give where you had maybe good experiences?
I had one good experience after the Chinese buyer's agent, which was a nice sort of introduction to what a buyer's agent is. But it was a very much just a call, it wasn't a Zoom call, so it wasn't on video, and I wasn't really prepared for that. So I didn't know what a buyer's agent was at all then. And so after that one, which that buyer's agent just spoke a lot and sort of shared property examples, then I started to see. I thought, okay, I need to understand this better. So the second buyer's agent I had, actually I found through Instagram, and they just asked, "Hey, I see you following me on Instagram. Is there something I can help you with? Is there something that you're looking for in particular with property?" And so I just explained my situation, and they were very responsive and just talking to me, through Instagram for, probably a week or two. And they said, like, "I'm also a buyer's agent. If you want to have a call, let's have a call." So I took that call, and we had probably a 90-minute call, a chat. So that was nice. That's my first real call with a buyer's agent, and that was definitely an experience where I just thought, okay, this person is obviously building a business, but they also are just interested in they're property investors themselves, and they just like talking about property. So it felt like I was talking to a friend, even though I didn't know this person, and they were able to sort of share their philosophy and what they're doing right now in the markets they work in. So that was a great first experience. And then sort of they just kept coming. As I said, there were 9, so they definitely varied, and that was one of the early positive ones for sure.
Out of the 9, do you know how many were good out of the ratio? So would it be like 4 out of the 9, 5 out of the 9? Like what would you say from a numbers point of view? Doesn't have to be exact.
Definitely. Probably a 50-50
Okay.
split. Yeah.
I think that's important to say because there are good buyer's agents. I know some buyer's agents get smashed out there by people on the media saying buyer's agents are horrible, this and that, but there are good and bad in everything. So it's great to hear that I'm actually surprised 50% is pretty good. I was actually expecting it to be lower. But I have to ask before I forget because it's on the top of my mind, but did you get smashed with email campaigns out of the 9? Because when you go on these things, they just smash you and with emails. Did you get a lot of those spamming?
I did sign up for some newsletters or just resources, so where they give a free ebook or something. So obviously then I'm on their database. But so from, I guess, was it maybe 3 that I get some regular updates and resources or just their sort of weekly, monthly newsletter. So beyond that, no. So just that. And then obviously just the one-to-one emailing back and forth between that buyer's agent that I spoke to. But I should also mention, like, what I discovered, that sometimes you're speaking with the owner, the founder of that company, which I thought was really great. And then sometimes you're speaking with someone who is maybe that initial contact person, and they're not the actual buyer's agent. I didn't realize that after maybe the second time it happened. I thought, okay, so you're not my buyer's agent. You won't be my buyer's agent. You're going to pass me on to that next person if I sign up. So I also found those calls not as useful. Even though those people were knowledgeable about their company, it just didn't seem like, that's when it felt a little maybe salesy and let's get you on board and then we'll show you what we really do. But otherwise it just felt too generic and I didn't really connect with that style.
Yeah, I guess because you're dealing with 2 different people. I think there's pros and cons to it all. Like if you do meet the director up front, because they're obviously trying to build the business, so they can't, they can't be doing all the buying and all that type of stuff because they might be focused on that. But I guess if you do get handed over, you still want them to be in the background, making sure that the property that you purchase, that they're still there on the journey. They might not be the main contact point, but they're still there and they're in your corner. At the end of the day, that's what you want a buyer's agent for, is to be in your corner and not rush you. So that's, good to hear. And was there anything, I guess, bad, like I'd say the salesy stuff, did you notice that a lot where they sort of pressure you, tomorrow the price is going up or anything like that? Like what was the bad experiences that you had?
Yeah, there was one where it definitely felt like there was a script to it and it felt sort of those, in terms of I was going through a slideshow, which is fine. I like they had visuals and, some good information there. But as you go through the slideshow, this buyer's agent was, always trying to get me to say yes. Does this sound like a good idea? Is this something that you think you could see yourself doing? And it was just constantly trying to get me to say yes, which is, obviously a psychology trick to get you to agree. And then if you're agreeing, then you're going to be more agreeable later on when they say, okay, now let's sign up. But none of them ever wanted me to sign up there and then. They obviously would do their follow-up. Some were better at it, some weren't. So, and I appreciated that follow-up because it shows you that, they do want you, and you all want to be wanted. So I did like that. I didn't mind being, harassed in quote unquote, but because then I would harass them back with more questions and they were happy to come back with me. So I liked that engagement after the call, but definitely during the call, I didn't like that feel of it. It wasn't a back and forth. It was, here's my presentation and does this sound like a good idea? And then I started to say, I was saying yes. And then I'd pause a lot longer and just try and play my own psychology tricks back just to sort of take a bit of power back in the call.
Yeah.
So it was,
I think
so in the end it was.
Yeah, I get that. With a lot of the initial consultations, we obviously had a script to run to, like where I worked before. And now, like you sort of do, you need some sort of agenda to work towards. But one thing that I never pushed was I never wanted to be sort of salesy in any way. It just wasn't me. Some people have it. If I get a sniff of someone trying to sell me something, I'm pretty much looking the other way. Obviously, you're going there to learn, but I think the connection and the trust is number one. And you just got to be careful listening to a podcast or whatever it might be. I think you just have to be on that call to see if you really connect with them and if they're in your favor, because it's easy to listen and they build trust through these podcasts. You're thinking fantastic, but you still need to do due diligence, don't you, Jez?
Yeah, and it's extremely difficult to gauge trust with someone on a first date, second date. whatever.
Well,
I mean,
it takes years to
about.
build trust,
Yeah,
doesn't it? It takes
years.
years. And a lot of people are so like, yep, where do I sign? Like they see the things on Instagram that, this, I see these promotional things saying, they've spent millions of dollars on their own AI and, we're the best, we're the only one in the world with this algorithm. And I'm just like, oh my God, you're killing me. But a lot of people buy into it.
Yeah. Well, it must work. They do all right.
Were there any immediate red flags with any of the BAs where you just thought early on, this isn't for me? Like besides maybe the bit of the salesy stuff, was there anything else where you said, no, I'm not into them?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a few, and the one that stands out, I guess, was that you could tell some BA companies were only buying in one particular market, and they were almost just ready to sell your property tomorrow. Like they said, we've got a house ready, we've got a unit ready. Like we only buy units in this area, and the yield is great. So, and that made me think, okay, maybe this is the way I go. That they seem successful. They've got these success stories, and so I thought, okay, is this another strategy that I should be looking at? And that's what I was trying to garner from all these calls: is what's my approach to this? But I was also needed the BA to understand my circumstance. We've all got unique circumstances. I'm an expat. I've got limited lending options. It's my first property. So I need you to sort of work with me where I'm at, and not just here's a property in this market for this price, and here's the yield, and we'll see you later, and we'll do it again in 6 months when we can bring out the equity. So I felt there was that side as well to the BA world, that they weren't interested in what I was doing, what I wanted. They didn't want to find out. They're just like, here's properties, and we're going to sell. We've got it ready for you.
The way I approach any conversation is like, I'm trying to work out how can I help? Like obviously my time's limited, and obviously this platform's fantastic because we can hit a big audience from our experience and our knowledge. But for you, what was the main thing that you wanted a buyer's agent to do for you? What was your primary goal? Because you got two things. You can look at it. There's a lot of investors that are just buy anywhere. I want to follow the data, the information. I just want to set and forget approach, and that's it. And try and build up that equity as soon as possible. But there are circumstances where you might look, I want to buy a property. I want it to be an owner-occupier in the future. There's some type of that emotional element. So for you, what was the main reason you wanted to utilize a buyer's agent?
I wanted their expertise. I believe that there were ones out there that had real knowledge, they had real connections as well, network because obviously when you start getting into this world, there's this off-market world, and then there's the market world where you find on domain and realestate.com. So I saw the off-market world as maybe this sort of sweet candy that I wanted to taste, but I thought, how do I get access to it? And how big and how great that off-market market is, I don't really know yet. It seems really vague, but they definitely lure that in front of you. So I thought that's a big advantage if they can find something that is not it is off market. But also I just feel that like I could trust them, and they knew what they were doing, and they could help me in particular, not just me as a general buyer, but me with my circumstance, and sort of just cut through some of the noise and say, okay, this is really what you should be doing at your age with your budget, based on what you want to do in terms of when you want to retire. So I really needed that sort of clarity, and I needed someone, I guess, who knew the expat situation. And that was sort of what I was also looking. I needed someone who was actually a little more expat focused, and in the end, someone who's focused on who had experience in the market that I ended up buying in Sydney. So that was really important as well, where I ended up deciding to buy.
I think that's the key point. You wanted to go to Sydney. You didn't really want to go to any other market. You did want to buy in Sydney, correct? So you were sort of crossed out all those other markets because you've got an attachment of potentially living in this Sydney property. So that's a really key point, because there were other markets you could have invested in and maybe had better capital growth, but you wanted to lock in down that Sydney property first. And I think it's a good angle. Like people might argue it, buy in this Perth or Melbourne or like wherever it might be, but you don't want to jeopardize that Sydney property, because if you go buy an investment and you don't get that capital growth, you jeopardize that Sydney purchase down the track. So this is why planning and strategy is really important, and people don't think about it. So, and the other thing was off market. Jeremy, what do you think? If you had a property to sell, would you go off market?
No. There's no reason why. I want the biggest number of potential buyers to know about it.
It's flashed out a lot. The under market, the off market. We get sick of hearing it, don't we, Jez? Like it gets very annoying.
Yeah.
But it's a sales tactic. It's what they've got to.
Yeah,
flash.
if you are a buyer's agent and that is your key benefit, then you would want everyone to believe that I can get what you can't get. I can remember seeing a post, I think it was on LinkedIn, where one buyer's agent said that in their market there were one in two properties were being sold off market, and they were in Melbourne. I mean, I don't know if it was a very specific part of Melbourne. Maybe it was just one street, but there was nowhere near 5%, let alone 50%. It is a rare thing, the whole off market. The event is rare, but the promotion of it is everywhere.
Promotion, that's right. And I think moving forward, like with the fee structures, this is one thing that I know we spoke about, Ricky. Like everyone had their own different style. So you had like a lot of fixed price buyer's agency fees, but then you had a tiered system. So I'm just interested, how did they, I guess, push the tiered system? So did they say, look, the higher priced properties, it takes more effort to buy them. That's why we're charging a higher fee?
Yeah, and as through those 9, you could see a split of tiered versus fixed, and because I didn't want to focus on price so much. I thought, okay, if I'm going to buy a property and I'm going to use a buyer's agent, then if it's one is 2,000 or 3,000 more or less, then I'm just going to go with the one that I didn't let price determine my final decision. That I just took it. Because I could have just gone with the cheapest one, and I thought that's not good for me. And when I looked at what the cheapest one was, it definitely wasn't good for me. So, but in saying that, I didn't like the fact that some were like, if you went into the million and plus and up to 2 million, it did become quite a big expense. So I did have to factor in the tiered system and where I would be buying in and what that difference is, but as opposed to a fixed one. So in the end, it wasn't a huge consideration, and I didn't quiz them on why they did this to that. I just I accepted that it was their pricing model. I just focused on other.
Can you share like the price point? What was it? Was it for the property that you purchased in Sydney?
The price of the property?
The price point.
Yes.
Roughly.
It was between 1.4 and 1.6. So,
1.6
in that range, yeah.
And the fee for that roughly that you paid for the buyer's agent?
22,000.
Yeah, so it's like less than maybe 2% of the property value, which isn't too bad. You're overseas, you've trusted someone, they're working for you, they're not pushing you. So I see the value. I have seen people buy under 400,000 and pay a buyer's agent 25 grand for an under a 400K property. That's like 8%, close to 8% of the property value.
Wow. Yeah. You'd want that to perform pretty well, wouldn't you?
You'd want it 25 grand for a property worth less than 400,000. When I heard that, I'm like, okay, all right. Very interesting, that one. And I guess when you made the choice, did you feel any hesitation? So you obviously did a lot of your due diligence. And how long did my first question is, how long did it take you? Like, was it 6 months before you made a decision? Because by us having the conversation a couple months back, I realized that you know your stuff like more than an average person. Like you definitely knew the questions to ask, which I liked. But how long did it take you to make the decision? Or you found them at number 9 and said, these are the ones I'm going with?
It took about 5 months. It was 5 months of, like I said, I had time with the mortgage. Ended up going with Brighton Loans. They have a good expat service and package for Aussie expats in China. So once I went with them and put that all through, it still took that extra time, because I started in May, say, with the buyer's agent, the real talking with buyer's agents. So it wasn't until close to September, October where I locked one in. But it also turns out that when you decide on one, then the first one I decided on, actually, they weren't available. They didn't have an agent for me in Sydney in the time I wanted to buy. So it actually helped to have a second or a third that I could use, because otherwise I would have had to have waited several more months. And by this time it was September, October, and I just wanted to buy. Wanted to at least start looking to buy and not have to wait a few more months to start. So it did take a while.
Timing was a thing. And when you did, I don't know if I actually asked this question, but did you feel any hesitation? Did I ask that question just then?
Yeah.
Or, geez, there you go. So,
Oh yes, yeah, yeah,
like it was just,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there was definitely because, like I said, you're putting out $15,000, $20,000, and it's like, ouch, that's still a lot of money, even though you're buying a house, $1+ million. Like there's still an initial, okay, is this the right thing to do? Have I gone the right person? But the hesitation, sort of, because I had done so much work in the back end, and sort of front loading all this, it wasn't so much hesitation. It was just, okay, if you're forking up $20,000, there's always going to be maybe a little hesitation. But beyond that, it was just, no, I'm ready to go, and this is the way to go for me.
yeah, no worries. And did you? And I think that's a key point, like because you think it's a lot of money, but it's good that you've built that trust and you went with the right firm. You didn't just go with the
Mm.
first one and just went, okay, that's it. It's good you did your due diligence and
Well, yeah, I think that when you think $20,000 you're paying someone for a particular service, you say, yeah, that's a lot of money.
mm,
But I tell you what's a lot more is 1.5 million. You need to allocate 1.5
Mm.
million very accurately.
and how much do you value your time? Like you can't fly to Sydney, look for the like it's just a
Yeah,
lot more of
yeah.
a headache. So having someone in your corner definitely helps, even with the negotiation side or the contracts. I think that definitely helps. And would have you done anything differently? Doesn't sound like you would have, Ricky, but would have you done anything differently looking back?
Uh, I guess, yeah. There's a few things. I mean, they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and second best time was today. So I wish I. It was a year before. Say Christmas 2023, where we wanted to buy. So I wish I had started a year earlier, but that's just on me and my life circumstances. So I guess if you're thinking about starting, then just start, and then everything will get going from there. So you just got to, whatever it is, the mortgage broker, talk to a BA, talk to friends, get on Facebook, whatever it is to start. That's I wish I'd done that at least a year earlier, but that's in the past. So I just
Uh,
move on now.
Mm.
Everyone says that, and I don't know if you felt like this, Ricky, but I know for me, a long time ago, before I started the whole property thing, I'm like, I've missed the boat. I've missed the boat. This area's gone like in my head. I played. It was always games playing. Oh, I'm
Mm.
not going to invest. And then once I started getting comfortable with debt and dealing with clients and just really learning, it made me a lot more comfortable. And I just had to work within um, my own circumstances. So for you, did you always feel like, oh, it's already grown by this much? I've missed the boat, but you've pulled the trigger, which is fantastic, and congratulations. But did you feel like that, hearing all the noise that, oh, this market's grown by this much, I've missed out, I shouldn't buy it? Like, because a lot of people don't do it because they just believe it won't keep growing, and it keeps growing.
Mm.
So did you feel like that?
I
Yeah.
Oh, 100%, yes. Especially in the time I was looking, so the last, 18 months, let's say, obviously Perth has been a headline story, Adelaide as well, Brisbane and some other sort of markets. So you definitely hear about these 20% year on year growth, and you think, wow, it used to be 300,000, now it's 600,000, and all these sort of stories. And you think, oh gosh, I missed that, I missed that, I missed that. And I just but there's always another market, there's always another property. And like I said, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time was today. So I just believe that. And I believe in Sydney. I'm biased because I'm from Sydney, but I just think it's a fantastic place. And I want to be there eventually, go back there. So it was just, in the end, it became, where do I see myself living, and where do I see myself being long term? And obviously it was just a no-brainer for Sydney. So
Yeah, because you could argue that, oh, I could buy it, let's say, in a state now that's prime for capital growth, and then sell it and then buy in Sydney later. But there is always that risk that Sydney will keep moving just because there's such a limitation on supply, that property that you bought for 1.4, 1.5 could be 2, 2.1, and then you don't know what's going to happen with lending, your life circumstances. So I like your approach. You work to your circumstances and you blocked out a lot of the noise, and you found that right person to help you buy that property. That one, it's an investment now, but it is going to be your owner occupier, where you're going to live. So that's
mm,
important to mention.
yeah, and I guess just to add to that, like actually being an expat, I'm not an Australian tax resident, so I don't have the same tax benefits as an Australian local. So I had to also factor that in. It's like, if I'm buying in another market, and then I needed to sell it, then I don't get the capital gains benefit the 50% exemption as well. So I also have to factor some of these tax decisions into the mix in my calculations.
Yeah, and I guess like for expats looking to invest in Australia, well, like what's the biggest advice that you would um, you'd give someone? Like obviously the lending sounds like it's a very I think you mentioned one of the banks, but
Mm.
what was the biggest? What's the biggest piece of advice you'd give someone?
I would say, yeah, find a mortgage broker that definitely works with expats from your country of residence. So if you're based in Dubai, then there's definitely mortgage brokers that work with Dubai clients in Singapore, Hong Kong, US. So I would definitely find an expat-based mortgage broker, or at least talk to them. If you find one that's from Australia and maybe has worked with an expat here and there, they might not have access to the same lending list that some expat mortgage brokers do. So definitely the mortgage broker is key. And then I would definitely talk to people to try and find. And I also spoke to some friends who are based overseas who bought overseas. So if you're based overseas, then try and talk to as many people from Australia who actually have bought from overseas and just see how it worked for them. I wish I had more to access. I only had one in the end, but they were a great resource.
I had some expats. I remember once I had one in Italy. I had one in Spain. I had one in. I've had the US, New York. I had a client. I had some in New Jersey. I've had them all over actually.
Mm.
And I know lending was most probably the biggest issue, but for a lot of the London, but a lot of the clients, they were purely just investment. Like they just wanted to buy, get that capital growth. They just wanted exposure to the Australian property market. But I remember lending was always sort of the challenge for them. But I guess, yeah, I think lending is just one thing. Working someone that's going to work for you is a key thing. And I guess the other thing would be like, what's next for you? So you're overseas. So do you max your lending actually for this property purchase that you did? Did you have more lending or did you sort of max it out where you're comfortable with?
Yeah, so in the end, Brighton, well, yeah, able to give me enough with our deposit to buy what we wanted in Sydney. So I'm under my name, I'm maxed out, but also what I discovered in this process was that so with Brighton and perhaps with other lenders, you can have two people on the loan and then one person on the title. So moving forward, we could borrow again from Brighton, and then my wife would be on the loan as well. So they would use her income
Mm.
plus my income and what our assets are, etc. And then when we go to purchase, the title would then just be on my name as a local, as an Australian. So there is that option that we'll pursue further down the line to buy a second place or third, whatever it may be.
Yeah, nice. And that's the next plan for you. Obviously, just you've got that property there. You're living overseas. When are you planning on coming back to Sydney?
Yeah, I definitely I feel like I've got a pull to go back in the next, I can't put a number on it. Let's say it's maybe 5 to 10 years, but I definitely, yeah, I'm sort of nearing the end of my time overseas for sure. But I also have a young family, so I have to, yeah, factor that in. And when's the best time to come back with the family? So in the meantime, I want to, yeah, buy a second place in another market that also could be just a pure investment play, great capital growth, obviously on the a more affordable side to the Sydney one, but that's something I'm starting to look at now. I guess I'm still coming down from the high of buying and going through the settling process over Christmas, which was a whole another learning experience. So I'm coming down from that, and now I'm trying to digest everything and understand what it is to be a landlord and not just a renter, because I've always been a renter. So that's a good experience as well.
Yeah, nice one. Jeremy, did you have any questions for Ricky?
Yeah. You have lived in loads of different cities around the world, visited loads of different countries in those 20 years. Is Australia still a good place to live? Can you put sentiment and bias aside and assess Australia for its investment potential? Or are there other countries around the world that you've had your eye on maybe?
Uh, yeah, it's if I put bias and sentiment aside, I definitely I feel Australia is a great place to live. I think it's a great place to have a family. Obviously, Australia is huge, so I think if you don't want a major city, you've got some great regional areas that obviously are more affordable. But Australia as a whole is I think it's just I mean, lifestyle wise, compared to the rest of the world, it is up there. It just beats on so many metrics. I feel it beats so many other places that I lived in and also visited. But in saying that, there's obviously there's a big push in, say, Southeast Asia to buy. I was just in Thailand, and there's so many properties there. They're always building there because Thais don't want to buy old; they want to buy brand new. And so it's very much a brand new, looks beautiful, and I see a lot of expats buying in Thailand. And I've looked at that because I lived in Thailand as well, but it doesn't seem, the numbers don't seem to match up. You can buy, obviously something for a few $100,000, but you can never sell it. It's very hard to sell. And the yield might be good, but there's never a buyer on the other side. There's never a buyer. And I've seen friends that have gone through that. They just hold it forever and it's just theirs. So, and beyond that, I just think, all things being equal, Australia is just it's an easy yes. I think it's an easy yes. Definitely, I don't see why not.
Yeah.
And I guess Sydney, from a city perspective, it's just the affordability is most probably gets a lot of the limelight. Super expensive, rent's expensive, and you got a lot of rent investors that they rent where they live, and they invest in other locations, or even in Australia. Like I've heard people obviously sell up, and they might go to Indonesia, Thailand, all these countries where it is a lot cheaper and earn the same amount of dollars if they're a nomad worker. So look, again, the one thing I like about you is you've got your strategy, and I think that's key. Like, you're overseas, you've got your young family, you're living over there, but you've bought a property, you're planning to buy another one. Like, at least you've sort of lined out what you're trying to target, which is key, without putting actually, have you got any financial strain? Like, with buying the property, do you feel any pressure with the mortgage, or you're comfortable? Like, you know that you can service it comfortably?
Yeah, we're all good on that side. Definitely servicing is fine. And having two incomes is obviously helps. If it was just my income, then yeah, I guess it might impact my lifestyle here a little, but it'd still be fine. But definitely with two incomes, it's not an issue as well. And as I said, it's being rented out, so getting the benefits of negative gearing, and then those tax offsets will kick in later on when I move back to Australia, and I'll make use of them further down the line.
And just to finish up, have you ever lived in the US?
No, no.
Okay. Did you have plans to live in the US at all, or not? Because I'd be keen to see how US versus Australia, like what your thoughts would be on that. But that's okay.
That's where I first wanted to move to, actually. Early 2000s, I did apply for a visa to live there, and it didn't work out. I didn't get the visa. It was post 9/11, so it was quite tricky to get into the US. So that would have been a different story. But yeah, definitely the US market is fascinating as well, and watching all those shows on Netflix and the like, it's a wild market there as well.
Just to finish up, just on a personal level, I'm just asking, just off the cuff here, but like, what made you do the whole like traveling thing? Like, when did you actually start? Like, you obviously been traveling around for years and years. I respect that. Like, you make the jump. A lot of people don't leave their town or their city in forever. They stay there. But you've obviously gone out, explored, and you've built out your portfolio. So what gave you that push to go traveling and work?
Yeah, I did. Obviously, I did some overseas trips while I was at university, and then I ended up going to London, finishing a European trip and finishing in London. I sort of fell in love with London. I was like, oh, this place is incredible. Why don't I live here? Like, and obviously a lot of Australians, this was back in 2005, 6. So many Australians were living in, there still are. So it just seemed like an easy, I'll go to London and let's see what happens. And I just finished my university. I'm a school teacher. So I went over there and started teaching. And it just snowballed from there, because then from that, I just made new connections and used my network of teachers to sort of move to another country, into another country, and sort of it's just snowballed from there. So it wasn't a plan to stay overseas this long. I definitely didn't have the intention to, but also was open to whatever the experience was. And I guess that's just in my nature, to be open to what's out there.
All right. Well, thanks, Ricky. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast. We're hoping to get more guests on in the future, but you're the rarity at the moment. You're one of the early ones, so no pressure. But hopefully people can find value in just listening to you, because when I sat down with you, I remember I was in the co-working space in Zetland there, and I was just sort of there, and we had a chat in the little room, and I'm thinking, oh, this is okay. And then I spoke to the assistant to the regional manager, and he mentioned that would be an awesome podcast. And I'm like, okay, so the credit goes to the assistant regional manager, Adam. That's credit goes to you, buddy.
Thank you.
There you go. But appreciate it. Take care, and we'll hopefully catch up when you're back in Sydney.
Good on you, Ricky.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. Yeah, love your work. Okay, thank you so much. See you soon.
Valuable intel. Thanks.
Take care. Bye
See
bye.
ya.
That was a cracker, Jez.
Yeah, quite unique experience. Isn't
Unique.
It?
And I think if anyone's got any challenges, reach out to us at info@suburbdata.com.au. If they're struggling or challenged with anything, they can reach out to us and we can point them in the right direction, because that's the reason why we're doing this. Yes, we're a business, but we really want to help people, don't we?
Sure do. Yeah. So if this was of any interest to you, give us a thumbs up so we can bring more of this. And maybe you know someone else who would benefit from this. Maybe you have an expat friend overseas. There's a share button to make that easy.
And I think we are, like, if you've had some experience where you think it would be great for people to listen to, not just like the story where you've made millions of dollars over the couple of years, motivational stuff, that's great. Like, I'm all for it. But something where maybe we haven't spoken about or touched on, where you can come on and actually provide value without selling anything, about the experience that you've had, just to, I don't know, a bit of a good educational platform for people.
Yeah, we're open to more of that.
All right,
Yeah,
so
good.
that's all right. Subscribe, everyone. Like, share to the world. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in our next episode. Bye for now and take care.